Okay, today's the end fed build, and we're going to build the big end fed. Now, one caveat, my eyes were bigger than my property. I walked it off and took a tape measure out there, and I don't have enough room for a 160 meter end fed. That's an antenna that's about 270-ish feet long, and I would have had to make a dog leg, which I didn't want to do because that affects the pattern. So instead, what I'm going to build is a 120 meter end fed. So 120 meters is about 210, 207, 200 feet of wire, depending on how it trims out. So for the 120 meter band, I know that the rough cut is going to be, I've already measured this off to give me about 220 feet, give me plenty of room to trim, so I'm going to cut that right about here. And of course, when we final trim this antenna, we're going to have to tune for the voice portion of the 120 meter band. So oops. So this is going to be interesting. Very windy today. And I have to hit a target that's about 6 inches wide with the slingshot to get the line over the tree. Let's see how I do. This may take a couple times. Strike one. I fully expect this to take about 3 or 4 times to get this right. This was a success. I got 100 foot of paracord from the top of this tree, way up in the tippity top. That's my goal for the day. So now the next step is to put a fence post. So clearly I'm not going to make a 120 meter antenna because the 120 meter band doesn't exist. But I am going to make an end fed that is resonant at about 2.4 megahertz, which if there were a 120 meter band, that's about where you'd want it to be. So why am I doing that? So to answer that question, we have to start with the simple fact that I'm really not interested in the 160 meter band. If I were to build a 160 meter end fed, it wouldn't be so that I could get on 160 meters and chat. That's not what I would build it for. Yes, it would be nice to have another band and have that ability, but what I'm going after is whenever you have a wire that's multiple wavelengths long, you get the unintended or intended side effect of gain. So you'll get gain off of these long wires, and the gain is what I'm looking for, because ground effects are your friend and they can be your enemy too. So on the higher frequency bands, they're your friend on 10 meters and 15 meters and 20 meters. If you have a horizontal antenna, the ground effect will amplify your gain a little bit and you'll have a better antenna as a result. But it's your enemy in that in lower frequency bands, when you get to 40 meters, 60 meters, 80 meters, 160 meters, Now the ground is working against you, and those horizontal antennas that we like so much don't have as much gain because the ground is working against the pattern of the antenna, which gives us good local communications because the energy, the RF energy, is directed almost straight up in the air. But if you want to talk to distant stations, communicate with distant stations, and that presents a problem. So most guys will just put up a vertical and call it good, or maybe a Yagi that's a little lower than perfect height, but Yagis always amplify gain, so that works too. But another way to do it is to have a multiple wavelength wire. So when you have a wire that's multiple wavelengths long, and you get multiple current humps on that wire, what happens is you get some gain. And that's happening because of ground interaction. And as I've mentioned before, let's take an 80-meter end-fed as an example. So you build an 80-meter end-fed antenna. It's going to be about 130-ish feet long. And it's perfectly horizontal, unlike this one, which will have a vertical run. But let's say this one's perfectly horizontal. It's a flat top. And running that antenna on 80 meters, because it's so close to the ground, you're going to get this bubble of RF pointing straight up in the air, which is awesome for local stations out to about 700 miles maybe. But for anything farther than that, with that pattern pointing straight up in the air, that kind of presents a problem. So now let's take that same antenna, which is 130-ish feet long, and this time we're going to run it on 40 meters. So now this antenna has two current humps. It's like two end feds back to back. And what happens is the pattern starts to flatten out. But that's not the length that does us the most good, because when there's two current humps on the wire, what ends up happening is you have them trying to cancel each other out. So you'll have one that's positive, and then you'll have another that's negative, and they try and cancel each other out. So the first even harmonic is not the one to shoot for. That's probably, as far as useful patterns, is probably the worst one that we can come up with. So a 40-meter transmit frequency on an 80-meter antenna gives you two current humps, one positive, one negative. They try and cancel each other out, and you get this weird pattern that's not very good. So now let's multiply that 66-foot end fed times 3, and we'll get 3 current humps, and we'll have a wire that's just over 200 feet long, or somewhere right around 200 feet long, which is what we're shooting for here. So it's like 3 66-foot end feds back to back, and it ends up being about 200 feet long. So with that third current hump on the pattern, now we start to get some useful gain. It starts to push that pattern flatter to the ground, lower angle, and it becomes more useful for long distance communication. So from the first even harmonic, which you don't want, we go to the first odd harmonic, which is okay, and then anything above that is good for distant stations. So if we run that same antenna that's 200-ish feet long on 20 meters, we'll get 6 current humps, and we'll get some useful gain. So this antenna is going to be about 200 feet long. It's going to have a vertical run that's about 40 feet, and then it's going to take off over the house about about 170-ish feet, something like that. No, less than that, 160-ish feet, something like that. And it's going to be tuned for 2.4 megahertz. And we should be able to use it on 20 and 40 meters, and we should get a good result. But before we do that, we need to get our rope that's going up into our tree ready to go. So I'm using these little pulleys, and I just get these at the hardware store, and I'm going to tie my rope that's going up to the tree around this. So to do this, I'm just going to use a very common knot for putting a swivel on a fishing line through the clevis. And then we're going to tie a knot. So I got a knot started there. I'm just going to loop that over. And the reason I like doing that is because we got two paracord windings over that. This is usually where they break. So we got two over that now, and they make it a little bit stronger. So this wire is about 210 feet long. I said 220 earlier. I was mistaken. I need to provide some strain relief here, so I'm going to loop it through these holes. And I'm trying to keep it as far away from the metal fence post as I can get it. This post is only a couple feet in the ground. Should have worked nicely. I'll shrink that down. Since this is just a temporary setup, I'm just going to use a wire nut. So this is a 49-to-1 balun. It's one of Adam's K6 ARK's end fed kits, 100 watt. That's what it looks like. So it loops down through here. This wire will go up. Got some shrink wrap there to hold it in place, and then there's just a wire nut going to the antenna wire coming out of the balun. Here's our counterpoise going down around the pole. I've got it anchored with a screw right there. So it is grounded to the pole, but the pole's not in very deep. It's only down about 3 feet. So not a huge distance, but it's down a little bit. So now we'll pull this up in the air. The wire that I'm using is 14 gauge. And I would have liked to use something a little bit lighter. But the problem is that with a 200-foot wire, if you go too light, then the wind will just break it. So 14 gauge, a little bit heavier, but quite a bit stronger. Okay, we got some healthy RG8. And that's going to screw into this common choke, like so. And then into the 49-to-1. So this may be pushing Adam's 100-watt kit to new levels. I don't know if anybody's ever built a really long end fed out of one, but that's what we're doing right now. I'm reasonably certain that no one has built one cut to 200 feet. I need to put some tape around that eventually, but okay, so now I got to go anchor the other end of this wire, which isn't going to be fun because, so there's my Yagi, 10-meter Yagi, and then my fan dipole is attached to that same tower. And then there's the wires to the fan dipole coming down. I hope you can see those. But I have to get this end fed wire over that somehow. I guess the easiest way would be to climb the tower and just lift the spool right over to the top of that and then climb back down. So the other end of this wire, the long end, is going to go over this tree in the front yard. Now generally this is not a good idea, and I'm actually hoping that the wire is shorter so that it doesn't touch the tree. I'm not holding my breath. On the taller tree I used a slingshot. On this one I'm just going to lob something heavy up there. And we have an antenna. So we have an antenna. Vertical wire going up about 40 feet. Maybe a little less. And that wire will go all the way out in the front yard, over that tree in the front yard, and it's tied off to one of the gate posts. So that end of it's probably only, I'm going to say, 10 feet off the ground, maybe 12 feet. This end of it, this vertical section, is a solid 35 to 40 feet. So we should be good there. Now, luckily, because of the way I'm doing this, we have a feed point that's pretty close to the ground. Normally it's not like that. And normally I can't do what I'm getting ready to do right now, which is check the resonance of it with the nano VNA. So normally you have to check it through a piece of coax, and there's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes your feed point's 40 feet in the air and you're stuck with it. But in this case, we're not. So I will go ahead and calibrate this thing real quick. So I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons I like end feds is because they're easy to build and they're easy to get in the air, especially if you're doing it this way, where the feed point is close to the ground and you have a vertical section. That's really convenient. But there is some difficulty when you're putting one of these up in the air, because although they're easy to build, they can be difficult to tune, like any multi-band antenna. So any multi-band antenna can be difficult to tune simply because you might find 4 or 5 different resonances in the antenna, which gets confusing. So multi-band antennas can be difficult to tune, and one of the things that I'll do to help keep from getting totally frustrated is I'll try and find the fundamental frequency first. In other words, this one, the fundamental frequency is about 2.4 megahertz. So I will make sure that that's the case. So this one ends up being 2.140. A little bit higher than that. 2.160 is where that is. So pretty close. Now that once I've established that, now I'm going to go ahead and broaden this out a little bit, and I'm going to check it through 25 megahertz. And here's why it can be difficult, because you can get, right here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 resonances on this antenna. That can get confusing real fast. So the next one is 4.120, and then we have 6.520. That will be 40 meters. So right off the bat, I can tell you we're long. And there's 8.6 megahertz. There's another one at 11. This one coming up is probably 20 meters. 13,240 is 20 meters. So we're definitely long. SGWR is 2.2. It's not great. We might have too much counterpoise, or not enough counterpoise. I'm not sure yet. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. So 13,240, I need to come up in frequency quite a bit. So we're definitely low on frequency. I'm going to try and center it on the 20 meter band. So let me get it back here. Now I'm going to run out in the front yard, and I'm going to drop that wire down, and I'm going to fold back. Let's see, I'm going to fold back 3 feet and check it again. Okay, we are folded back 3 feet. And remember, when you fold back 3 feet of wire, you're not shortening the antenna by 3 feet. What you're doing is you're shortening the antenna an unknown amount between 0 and 3 feet, and that hardly changed anything. So I'm going to go pull some more off of it. I'm going to pull, since that changed hardly anything, I'm going to pull about 6 feet off of it. Now, the funny thing is, if you're cutting, let's say you're cutting a 20 meter end fed that's 33 feet long. Obviously, you couldn't pull 3 feet off of it and make it work because it would be way too short at that point. But remember, we're not shortening one antenna, we're shortening 6 antennas end to end. So a 200 and whatever foot length of wire, that's 6 33 or 30-ish foot 20 meter antennas back to back. So you have to pull a lot more wire off than you would think. It's actually what you would normally take off of a 30 foot antenna, you multiply that times 6 to get an equivalent shortening on such a long antenna. So let me go pull a bunch more off. So what I did is I cut off that 3 feet that I folded back, and then I folded back 4 additional feet, and that got me to 13,480. I still have a long way to go. So I'm going to take a big cut. I'm going to take about 8 feet off of it. So I cut another 6 feet off, and now it appears we're pretty good. As far as frequency, 14.200, and we'll go down to 40 meters. We have 7 megahertz flat. I think that's just where we are. 2.5 to 1. Now that's not all bad because we haven't hooked the coax up yet, and when I hook the 100 feet of coax to this antenna and go in the house, it may be fine because all that coax is going to change things a little bit. So that's the next step. We got the frequency where we want it, so let's go see how it receives and maybe transmits. Okay, back in the house, I got all of my antennas hooked back up now. So the 20, 40, 80 fan is hooked up. This is the 10 meter Yagi that you're looking at right now. And I'm sweeping from 1 megahertz all the way to 30 megahertz. Then you can see, there you can see the 10 meter band coming in. 28260 is where that beam is resonant. Now I'm going to switch to my fan. So this is a 20, 40, 80 fan dipole. And you can see, let's see, that's 25 megahertz, we got a dip. And here's 15 meters, which this antenna is usable on 15 meters with the tuner and the radio. And then 13760, this is the 40 meter band. It's actually a little low on frequency. I wonder, well, see the end fed that I just installed is running perpendicular to my fan. It may affect it a little bit. It might run some of the frequencies out just a little bit. 7.3, 380. Yeah, I'm not so sure that'll even tune. It kind of messed up my other antenna. There's 80. 80 still good. 3.9 megahertz, and we're 1.1 to 1, but it sure hosts 40. Let's see, 7.3, 380, I believe. Still usable with the tuner. I don't know if we're going to get an apples comparison on receive though. Okay, now let's check the new one that we just installed. Our end fed is right there. And as I mentioned, it's usually good to start by checking to make sure your fundamental is pretty close. And I expected this to be resonant at 2.4 megahertz, and we're at 2.45 megahertz. So nailed that. And then our first resonance is at 4.770. The next one is 40 meters, and it's resonant at 7.090, and it's good. It's 1.1 to 1. And then we have a resonance at 9.7 megahertz. We have one at 11 megahertz, 1.7 to be exact. Here's 20 meters, and it's 14.050, and you can see it got a little better at the end of a 100-foot coax run. That's typically the case. So more than usable. And now 16.6 megahertz, there's another dip. 19.270, there's another dip. 21.590, there's the 15 meter band, it's pretty good at 1.5 to 1. 23 megahertz and 25 megahertz, and it looks like 28 is going to be off the band because I have the Nano VNA set up to go all the way to 30 megahertz, and I don't see anything there. So let's go ahead and hook it to the radio and see how it compares with my fan as far as receive.
That radio has been trumped by many other radios at this point. Only two, those guys come out to legal limits, they're on transistor amplifier.
Yeah, Nick, tell you what, your radio sounds good, I like it.
Yeah, fantastic. Now I finally got it drilled down, and yeah, the Apache Labs, got a little bit of reflected here, but 3 watts, I mean, what the hell is that? You know, and again, Merkelot, the only new legal limit, so yeah, I'm not doing like big boy power like with an Alpha, but yeah, it works, man.
Yeah, well, I'm on the 8410. It's a new addition to the Alpha family. And I still got the 299s, and I got this big 77, the DX, you know, the single 1500 in there. I sold the SX.
Alright, thanks, Keith. And Carl, we'll be right with you. Scotty, I would say based on the signal report you gave me, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's really not true.
So now I'm on the fan.
Larry, you go ahead, and Lonnie.
I switched over to the fan. I'm going to switch back and forth between the fan and the end-fed, and we'll see the difference in signal level and noise.
He was getting some shots. Have you put the newspaper, the folded up or rolled up newspaper, have you been able to put it away yet, or do you still carry it around in your back pocket?
Once they get the DX100 set up and functional, what they
That's end-fed.
not in the not too distant future, I'm going to try
fan.
that CW. See how bad it works.
And end-fed.
Report 15 over S9. In the station, took a Portland mobile. It's called Science Kilo Alpha 7JOA. Kasama na Sikwa, Elmer AC7EI. Same location, over. But we've been sitting here for the past 8 hours. Off and on. And Herbert, you forgot your buddy. Taga Oxnard na Pinoy na.
So the end-fed's about 2S units stronger on this station.
Check-in. Looking for your check-in for the wild system. Jump on in, drop your call.
If we try to, go online, it's a crapshoot. Sometimes I get lucky, but anyway, well overdue for that shopping exercise.
Okay, let's try 40.
In March, and all of a sudden get right to Easter, you get that cold temperature coming in. That's what we're going through right now. Man, I think yesterday it was like the high was like 43 or so, and it was nasty out and rainy and wet and cold. And I had to go and get some more firewood up to the back door, man. But look like Mother Nature gonna.
So this is a good example of signal noise ratio getting louder with the long wire. And what I need to do is pay attention to see if the signal comes up, or is it just the noise that's coming up. But right now I'm on the fan dipole, and I'm going to switch over to the end-fed, and then back to the fan dipole, and then back to the end-fed, and you can listen to the noise.
Right north toward Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called Black Wall Street. Don't know if you're familiar or not, but if you're not, I would advise you go Google that, man, and take a look, man. It's called Black Wall Street. gonna be a real big bike event there, right?
I do believe the signal comes up a bit
QSL.
too.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. Thank you very much for the report. Kilo Tango 7 Papa. You're also about a 5 and 9 down here in the island of St. Croix, go ahead.
So it seems like this big infed is actually better back east on 20 meters than my fan is, which is not surprising because my fan, I really didn't optimize it for 20 meters. They're the lower wires and they slope down. It's kind of an inverted V on 20. So this is doing pretty good back east, and it's pointed east, which from the miles that we looked at earlier is what's supposed to happen. You actually get an end fire off the end of that wire pointed east when you have a really, really long wire like that. So all in all, I'm kind of impressed. It seems to be working pretty good. And obviously I'm not going to leave it up because it's messed up my fan. The resonance is on 40 or way off now. But as an experiment, I'm going to experiment with it for a few more days here while it's up in the air and check signal noise and do some more testing on it, just because I want to know. Now, I knew that this 200-ish foot antenna would work because I built one before, but the last one that I built was actually an off-center fed. So I built a 207 foot off-center fed horizontal wire, and it was extremely noisy, so I did not leave it up. I took it down after about 2 weeks, but it did work just fine, and it did have some gain back east, but the noise level was just too high for my liking. So I can already say that this one isn't as noisy. I don't know why that is, but it's definitely a quieter antenna, and it definitely has some signal improvement to distant stations on the East Coast from this West Coast station here. So all in all, I think so far it's already a successful experiment. And the next one we're going to build, of course, is the loop. We're going to build an 80-meter loop. That's going to be a little more challenging. I have to put up 2 more supports because it's going to be triangular, a horizontal triangular loop, and that's going to be a big one. Big job. That's the one that will stay up in the air. I will not take that one down. That's going to be, it may end up being the replacement for my fan dipole. We'll see. But stay tuned. We'll get that one done pretty soon. But as far as this video, yeah, don't be afraid to use non-standard lengths. If you take a length of antenna that you know is resonant and you just multiply it by a number, it'll still work. In this case, we took a 40-meter end fed and we multiplied it times 3. We end up with an antenna that's 3 times 66, so 3 6s are 180, 3 16s or 3 6s are 12, 18. So 180 and 18, 198, which is about where we ended up. I cut about 10 feet off this thing. So the math actually works. If you use the 468 divided by frequency formula and use 2.4 megahertz as your frequency, you end up pretty close to the length that I ended up at. Just another possible length that you can make an end fed. We already know about the 40 meter. That's probably the most common. So 66 feet of wire with a 6.5 foot counterpoise is pretty common. And then 20 meter end fed would be about 33 feet with a counterpoise. 80 meter end fed would be about 130 something feet. Unknown counterpoise. I haven't built one of those yet. And this 120 meter, quote unquote, 120 meter end fed that ends up about 200 feet. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next build, which will be a horizontal loop, and we'll catch you on the next one.